purpose. Everything had meaning. She was just busy, 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 do. And she was doing more, probably 3 to 5 times as much as anybody else. It did worry me ever so slightly as I looked at that. But achievement, really important. And then appreciation. My best friend from high school remembers the day that she went to preschool for the first time. She was about 4, and she came back and told her mother with great disdain, well, some kids just don't realize that other kids were meant to be boss. Because she'd been in the sandbox and expected everybody to just kind of acknowledge her and appreciate her as the sandbox leader, and it hadn't quite turned out that way. But she'd expected not just to have control, but she'd expected the appreciation from them as well. So 2 things to do when parenting a driving child, a choleric child. The first one is to give them appropriate choices and responsibility roles. When Anne-Marie was little, 2 and a half, she wanted to learn to cook. If you've ever cooked with a 2.5-year-old, you know it takes 2.5 times as long as it should. But I had no choice, because I could either let her join in, or she was going to find the Sharpie and decorate the walls of the house, or do something else that, was going to be more disruptive. So I bought the little step stool and taught her how to cook with me with real knives and real fruit. We bought her the play school kitchen with plastic fruit. No interest whatsoever. Why would you want to play with plastic fruit when there's a real kitchen with real fruit? So I told her that she was the assistant kitchen manager. Now, she loved the word manager. I emphasized the word assistant, okay? In fact, years later, when she was in her teens, we went to a craft show. And you guys know Mary Englebright and her different sayings, the queen of everything. And so I bought a sign that said the queen of everything, and I bought her one that said princess of quite a lot. And I put mine on my door, she put hers on her door, and the next morning I woke up. So we had a little conversation, which I explained that the queen of everything pays the bills. She switched the signs back. And I promised her that when she graduates college, I will buy her own queen of everything sign, and that will be hers. So give them appropriate choices, and give them names, give them titles that are important. I also got her a little broom and dustpan at an early age, and she loved having that kind of responsibility. The second thing to do is thank them. And this can be hard if they've not been cooperative, because do we really want to say thank you to a child who's just copped an attitude? And I think some of them cop an attitude at birth, so it just kind of comes with the territory. And so what I finally learned that I could do is I could just say to her, even if I hadn't appreciated her attitude, I could say, honey, what would I ever do without you? And the number of times she's looked back at me and say, Mama, I have no idea. But thank them verbally. But the other thing that's really good is the chore chart, the sticker charts, where they can take and put little stickers to show visually all that they've achieved. And there were times Anne-Marie stepped back, and either she would say it or she'd be thinking it, I do more around here than anybody else. But she just loved to be able to see how much she had achieved and to be aware that we appreciated what she was doing. And then 2 things not to do when parenting a driving child, a choleric child. Do not let them take over. They will try. When we first moved to the Monterey Bay area about 8 years ago, our family went to the Monterey Bay Aquarium, and Amber and I were together, and we came upon this scene where a mother, who looked very tired, was talking to her 7-year-old daughter, who had been scolding her 5-year-old brother. And the mother is talking to the daughter, saying, honey, could you just let me be the mommy for today? And Amber and I looked at each other, and we had to run as far and as fast as we could, because we were about to bust up laughing, because of course the answer was no. If you have to ask a 7-year-old for permission to be mommy, you've lost the position of mommy. She has taken it over. So being aware and not letting that happen. And then don't let them push you into losing control, because anytime you lose control, they win. I remember years and years ago, I'm guessing they were 3 and 5, they had asked me if they could watch a movie. I said no. Could they watch TV? I said no. I was fixing dinner, and suddenly I felt ganged up on. Suddenly they were doing and saying and pushing every button I have, and I went from having a really very normally fine day, being patient with my kids, to yelling. I don't remember the details. I just remember that I sent them to their room and then felt awful. If you've ever done anything like that, where the mommy guilt suddenly comes crashing in, and I'm like, oh my goodness, we're going to need therapy for this. What happened? And I was thinking they're upstairs crying their little eyes out because I've just been such a horrible mom. And so I go up the stairs and I'm thinking, I'm just positive I'm going to hear sobs. And I'm probably at the stairs and I'm hearing giggling. And it turned out they were both in their closets, which shared a really thin wall, and they're talking to each other about how well their plan worked. Yeah, I was a victim of an elaborate setup. where they were both mad at me because I hadn't let them do their first two favorite forms of entertainment, which would have been a movie and watch TV. So their third favorite form of entertainment, evidently, is let's watch Mom look stupid. And I had evidently done a better job of looking stupid than I had in previous times. And so they were like congratulating each other on doing such a great job. I'm like, oh, I see who's in charge of this house right now. I lose control, I hand it over on a silver platter to a 3 and a 5-year-old. Not a particularly good idea. And became entertainment for my children. I like making them laugh, I didn't like being that kind of entertainment. So don't let them push you into losing control, because when they lose it, when you lose it, they get it and they win. We're going to look at the amiable personality, and we save this one for last not because they are least important. In fact, this personality is often overlooked and is often in presentations given very, very little time, like the expressive or the sanguine gets like 25 minutes, and then the amiable or phlegmatic gets 5. And that's not fair. That's not fair at all, because God made each and every one of our personalities. We each have gifts, we each have strengths that we share with each other. The visible clues that your child is an amiable personality, first of all, we call them a model child, not because they're perfect, but when you think about the models that make it on the covers of magazines, they have perfectly symmetrical faces. I mean, you've never seen Jay Leno on the cover of Glamour, because of course that chin sticks out too much. So we say they're a model child not because, oh, aren't they such a perfect child, but just there's nothing that sticks out. They're very balanced. Okay? They're a very balanced personality with nothing that sticks out. With your sanguine, they're loud and talking. With your expressive sanguine, they're loud and talking. With your amiable or your melancholy, they're very detailed. With your driving or your choleric, they're very goal-oriented, very leadership. And then with the amiable, phlegmatic, not so much. There's just nothing that stands out right away. We also say that they're kind of a chameleon, and that means just that they adapt depending on the needs of the situation. So with my son, I had the hardest time figuring out his personality for a long time, because he could be hysterically funny, and we would just have such a good time laughing together, and I'm like, he's a sanguine, just like me. And then I'd watch him on the playground, and he'd be bossing his friends around. I'd be like, oh, well, okay, he's a little bit more of a choleric, a little bit more of that driving. Then we'd be home, and he'd be organizing all of the stuffed animals and putting everything. I'm like, is my child schizophrenic here? Like multiple personalities. And what it was is that he was this amiable or phlegmatic personality that just adapts based on the needs of the situation. And so the way you can tell for this particular personality is by their goal. And their goal is peace. Peace often at any cost. And that's the zinger there, is that often they will sacrifice their own needs. They will sacrifice who they are to create peace and to make everything okay for everybody else. So if we were to do the little drama with the Mopettes, you would have the expressives up here being the star of the show, and then we would have the analytics who'd be off to the side producing it. We would have the driving personalities who'd be busy directing it. And so where do you think that the amiables would be? They would be right out here in the chairs. They would be the audience. Because there's nothing they like better than to just kind of sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. And appreciate all the effort that everybody else has done. So the two primary needs that an amiable personality has, the first one is respect. Respect. When Anne-Marie was, I think, first grade, she came home from school and she told a joke, which was appropriate for back then. I may have to explain it because it's been so many years. But the joke went like this. What kind of computer disks does a rabbit use? And the answer was hoppy disks. Okay, well that was funny because 20 years ago we used floppy disks. Okay, some of us sort of remember floppy disks. Well, she tells that joke, we all laugh. In our family, jokes are a big deal, so we gave her this respect for having told a good joke. Well, Jonathan, I suddenly see this light in his eye. He goes, I have a joke to tell. What kind of discs do rabbits use? And I'm like, oh my goodness, what's he going to say? And we're like, I don't know. He goes, carrot discs. And this is what we did. We laughed, but he could tell that we were laughing at him, not at the joke. And it was loving laughter. We weren't trying to make him feel bad, but he burst into tears because what he was after was that same level of, that respect that his sister had gotten for doing floppy disks and carrot disks. It was perfectly fine for like a little 3-year-old. It was a great little joke. And now he's an amazing punster, but respect. He couldn't get that respect that he wanted. And then the second one is self-worth. The second major need is self-worth. Often this personality, the amiable personality, their gifts take a little bit longer to develop. And so as they're going through school, they may not be getting the most popular, they may not be voted student body vice president, they may not be, but often what they are is they are the teacher's favorite student in the sense that they are always there, they have everything they need, they are good and kind to everybody else. And we used to call that citizenship. I don't know if you even give citizenship awards anymore. To me, it's one of the most valuable characteristics I can have in a student. But because it's not quite as flashy, it's not quite as obvious, and often parents don't realize what's happening at school. They don't realize that their child is this an amazing kid that is making such a difference for everybody else, but isn't being flashy about it. I see some nods happening back here. And so as a result, they often compare themselves to everybody else and come to the conclusion they're not special, that they have nothing of value to offer. And when Jonathan was little, Anne-Marie had learned to read, and he could, at that stage, he could do math that he shouldn't have been able to do for another 3 to 4 years. But because Anne-Marie was reading, he was distraught. And he sat at the edge of his bed, kicking his little feet and crying, "I'm not special, can't read." And it's hard when they compare themselves. So one of the things, and this will be one of the don'ts that I'll talk about in a moment, is that we not compare them to other people because they're already busily doing it. So respect and self-worth. Parenting an amiable child, first thing to do is get to know who they really are. This child will need you to be their advocate for the next 18 to 20 years. Because you will understand them in ways nobody else will. And I don't mean coddle them, I don't mean hover parent or helicopter parent or smother mother or any of those things. I just mean you're going to need to get to know them and teach them about who they are. I saw this one day with my son. I've been watching what his learning style was. I knew it wasn't so much visual, it wasn't even auditory, but I knew he was very tactile, very kinesthetic. He had to be part of an experience to really grasp it. And he was about 18 months at the time, and he asked me, he was in the high chair for lunch, and he asked me for juice, which is toddler talk for juice. So I went to the kitchen, and without him seeing what I was doing, this was my mistake, I poured juice into a cup, put the sippy cup lid on, it's all solid, and I bring it back to him, put it on the tray table. He was a little overtired, a little over-hungry, he starts to throw a tantrum. Juice! 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 And I'm like, dude, I brought the juice! And it suddenly occurred to me, oh, well, he didn't see me pour it, it's a solid colored cup. He does not believe there's juice in there. Now, my personality is like, dude, I have given you juice every time you've ever asked me for it. Why are you not believing me today? This, of course, will do no good. I have a child arching his back, which means he's about to go over in a major tantrum. So to calm the tantrum and to help him grasp what's happening, I quickly put him in a very gentle headlock, tipped his head down. He was very gentle, but he's a physical kid. Ripped the lid off of the juice cup. And he went from, and I think in his little brain, he thought the juice appeared at that moment because he was still too young and immature to understand. And after that, I made sure I brought the juice to the table and had him help me pour it. And he got to the stage where I could give him a solid cup and he believed there was juice in it. Now, if I hadn't have known my child that day, what might I have done? Punished him? Sent him to his room? If I was a spanker, I might have spanked him for insubordination. That's not what it was. It was a mismatch of learning style. When I solved the problem of him not understanding so that he could understand, we were good to go. And that was very helpful to me and to him in his early school years, where I would just meet with teachers occasionally to say, look, this is what I think is happening. They'd be like, oh, and things would be much better because of that. The other thing to do when parenting amiable is to be nice. To be nice. One evening, my husband and I were having a high-volume exchange of negative proportions in the proximity of our progeny. How's that for obfuscating that my husband and I fought in front of the kids? And so the kids had long since escaped upstairs, and we had settled our difference, and so I went upstairs to talk to them. And Jonathan was sitting on his bed looking down, and I sat down next to him and started to talk to him, and he wasn't listening. He just said, I hate it when the parents fight. It makes the children so sad. And I was like, okay, maybe the parents shouldn't fight where the kids can hear it, because I don't want the kids to be so sad. Not long after that, I heard Dr. Phil talking about when kids are present when parents fight. You can love or hate Dr. Phil, that's not my point, but he said it changes who they are. It changes who they can become. And I thought, okay, no matter how sorely I am provoked, I will not engage in that high-volume exchange of disagreement in the proximity of my children. And for the most part, I've been able to stay to that commitment, because all that my son really wanted was the two most important people in his life to be nice and to get along with each other. That's where his security came from. And so when we fought, it made me feel terribly insecure. And the two don'ts, the first one I've already hinted at is don't compare them with anyone. Not to a sibling, because they aren't that person, not to who you think you remember you were when you were a child. I've done that one way too many times. One parent came to me, as a father actually came to me after I gave this presentation, and he told me, and he felt very bad about it, that when his son would do things he didn't understand, he would look at him and say, "You are not my son." Now that's devastating for anybody, but especially for an amiable child. They need that sense of self-worth, that sense of respect, and that sense of belonging. They are always our child. They are always loved. And then don't overload this child with expectations or busyness. This child refuels with downtime and with sleep. And I'm going to illustrate this with one final closing story that not only illustrates this principle, but it also, to me, illustrates the value of this entire paradigm of the personalities. My son was invited to a birthday party, and again, he was in the 5 or 6 year old range, and he was very excited to go. It was his best friend, Jim. It was down in Southern California at the Riverside Live Steamers Park. I don't know if any of you have ever been there, but they actually have a steam train that the kids can ride on. He was in the train phase of life, so we thought this was going to be a great day. So we got there early, and it was him and Jim, and they were having fun. But what none of us realized is that Jim's family had invited like 90 other people to come to this party. And so as everybody else is starting to arrive, I'm watching my son going, and I'm watching him, and he's not eating the cake, and he's not participating in the games, and he's showing signs of distress. And so I intervene, and I take him over to the playground, which is next to the whole thing, but we're away from the crowd, and we swing on the swing sets, and we play on the monkey bars for about 20 minutes so we can unwind, and then we start to talk a little bit, and he tells me that what's wrong was this was nothing like what he expected. He thought it was just going to be him and Jim. That's what he really thought was going to happen. So when all these people showed up, it was like completely different from his expectations. And then it was just all these people. So we had a little discussion about what it meant to be an introvert, because my husband's a pastor, and after he's preached and then shaken hands with all the people and then discussed theology with those who want to do that, he comes home and sleeps for 4 hours because his batteries are completely drained by being around people. And then his sister, Anne-Marie, and I, the two ladies in the family, were both extroverts. Like, I won't sleep tonight after being with you ladies. I will just be on such a high and a buzz. I will be supercharged for the rest of the week because I've been with you. And so he thought he was probably more like his father. He thought that maybe he was an introvert and that he's drained by being with people. And so he had calmed down and relaxed, and we talked, and he decided he'd go give his gift to Jim and maybe have some cake and ice cream. And so we went back, and all that happened. Well, that night, as I was putting him to bed, we always went through the best part of his day and the worst part of his day, and I would pray with him. And so I asked him, and he said, well, the worst part of his day was all those people. And then I asked him his best part of the day, and he looked at me, my little philosopher son, and he said, well, Mama, today I learned something about myself that I didn't know before, and now I like myself better. And I thought, yes, this is what it's about as a parent. To be able to teach our children, first of all, to get to know our children well enough that we can then reflect back and teach them about who they are so that they can become the people that God created them to be. Thank you very much.